Chapter 25, Front Axles and Vehicle Alignment Factors, Day 1, Video 3, Knuckle Measurements. When we get to the diagnostics part here, where we're actually going to take some of the measurements on the steer axle, a couple of things that we're going to be looking for as we are doing that, even before we do our disassembly, just to see how worn it is and where that wear is occurring at. Example here, we've got the steer axle coming up here. We've got a dial indicator mounted either with magnetic base or some way of attaching it to that steer axle, right? Because we want to see the difference in the movement between the steer axle and the knuckle moving up and down. So our vertical play, we would set up our dial indicator so it's going to read vertical movement straight up and down on that steer axle. So with the base mounted to the axle, the dial mounted to the spindle, we can now get in here with the pry bar, pry up or down to get that movement of the spindle coming up and down. Manufacturers have a set amount of play up and down that they want. Vertical play could be 30 thousandths, 20 thousandths, something like that. So we need a certain amount of vertical play built into it, but they do have tolerances on what it will be. So here's our vertical play. Upper bushing free play. So in the case here, we've got the kingpin coming through this way. Our steer axle is coming down through here, and there's bushings with the kingpin coming through the middle. There are bushings that surround that are in the steering knuckle itself. So here we're going to measure where that happens to those bushings themselves. We've got our dial indicator. Again, we're going to mount it to the steer axle. Right, come up and have our dial touching here so that as we move this knuckle back and forth this direction, we will see play as that movement happens here. Tells us how much wear that we'll have in those bushings here. So that's going to be our upper bushing kingpin free play. The same example here would be the lower bushing free play. Again, same thing happens there with the kingpin coming through. Bushings here. We've got the dial indicator base mounted to the steer axle, and now the dial mounted to the knuckles to tell that play coming back and forth this way. So maybe a case of moving with a pry bar to get that measurement. Upper bushing torque deflection. Okay, so what we've got here again, the relationship of the movement from the axle, and here we've got the steering knuckle coming through here, kingpin coming through. We still got the bushings on the top, and we are checking for front to rear movement of that spindle over the kingpin, indicating bushing wear. Right, so we're going to check that with our upper kingpin bushing here. Same measurement we would do on the lower kingpin bushing. Make sure that we've got our base set to the steer axle and the dial set to the spindle. It has to be the measurement, the relationship, the change between those two measurements is what we're after. If we have to make an adjustment to our vertical end play, we have got shims that we can put in there. Manufacturers come with they give us multiple shims so that we can get that in the vertical play adjusted just how we want. So the kingpin, in this example, we've pulled the kingpin down through. Now we can slide this shim in between the steer axle and the steering knuckle. We always do it on the top because that's not where the load is transferred. The load is transferred through the bottom of our spindle, through that bearing, and into the steer axle. Right, so we don't put any shims or spacers below. They always go on top so that we can maintain that manufacturer's vertical play that they've asked for. We'd slide the shim in, and now we drive that kingpin back through and recheck our vertical play.